Hi, everyone. This is Dr. David Branham again with a chapter review. Today is going to be chapter 3 on theories and research. As I said before, this video is not meant to replace your reading, but because it's very comprehensive and I think I cover almost every test question when doing this, it should be a very beneficial video to watch. So I'm hopeful that it will help you do well in the test. So I'm going to start by sharing my screen, getting my PowerPoint up. As I said today, we're doing theories in scientific research. This is chapter 3. It will be the information on this PowerPoint and on this video will be in test 1. So let's go ahead and get started. Okay, start with theories. Theories are explanations of a natural or social behavior, event, or a phenomenon, and theories should be used to describe or predict, but they should also explain things as well. So if you have a theory that just describes something as a prediction, there should be some explanation behind it. Should be logical, rational reasoning in displaying the theory. So if you have something that sounds a little outlandish, sometimes you can have a theory that sounds that way, but then you can put together the steps, the logical sequence, and so forth, and the theory will come out. So as long as you have the ability to explain things well that are happening in your theory, you should be okay with your theory. It should be testable at that point. So that's what theories do. They describe and predict, but they also explain why they're describing and predicting. Statistical analysis and theory. Statistics can predict by association and correlation. However, they do not explain why. Theory and statistical analysis come together to explain and show cause and effect. So if you've ever heard of the expression, correlation is not causation, because there's a lot of correlation that goes on, and it doesn't actually help you explain causation. Just because two variables or constructs are related in what they do does not mean that the one is causing the other. In fact, it's impossible to tell just from that correlation which direction the cause would be coming from, if there is a cause, or it could be that there's a third variable on the outside causing that. For instance, the classic example of this is the churches and bars correlation. In cities around the country, the more churches that you have, the more bars you have. So obviously, you make the causal inference that churches cause more people to drink, and that's why they go to bars. Of course, that's ridiculous, because there's a third intervening variable that's actually causing both to go up or down, and that's the population itself. The number of churches and the number of bars will go up if the population goes up. They have no relationship whatsoever with each other in the correlation. So yes, there's association. The more churches you have, the more bars you have. That's an association. But there is no cause there. So unless you have a good explanation for that, you have to step back, say, is there a third variable causing this? Or is this correlation just a spurious correlation that we don't know is actually, has any cause or effect in it? As long as you have that, you need to have theory in order to come together and explain the show the cause and effect. So it's very easy to have a theory that, well, the more population you have, the more bars and the more churches that you'll have. That's an easy theory to explain. The theory of the more churches you have, the more bars you have, and the more churches you have cause you to have more bars, that's not really explainable. So you need theory in combination with empirical analysis to establish cause and effect. Scientific theories are different from theological or philosophical explanations in that scientific theories can actually be empirically tested. You can take numbers and data and test to see if a theory is correct, or whether you can't actually prove a theory is correct, but you can have empirical evidence, numerical evidence that the theory that supports the theory. You can't have that in theological or philosophical explanations. That's what makes science different than those disciplines. Establishing causation requires three conditions. One, you have to have correlations or associations between constructs. The movement of one variable should be associated with the movement of the other. That association has to be there if you're going to have cause and effect. So if one variable is causing the other variable to move, when that variable moves, that other variable will move in sequence. Now, this association could be positive or negative. For instance, there's horsepower and gas mileage. The more horsepower you have, the less gas mileage you have. It's a negative correlation, and it's probably causal in nature. So that's pretty easy to see that that's causal, but it meets the first thing that you need to have is an association, which the higher your horsepower, the lower your gas mileage. Now, higher horsepower could also, excuse me, result in more speed. So the higher your horsepower, the higher your speed can go. So that's a positive correlation because both one going higher causes the other to go higher. So you need to have association, one, to establish causation. Two, you have to have temporal precedence or sequence. One has to start, the independent variable or the causing variable has to move before the other variable moves. You have to have that sequence. You can't, another variable won't move. It won't cause another variable to move if the causal variable doesn't move first. So I think that's pretty easy to see in your mind. If an independent variable has to move either simultaneously or before the dependent variable in order to establish causation. And then third, you need to be able to reject the alternative hypotheses. So if I go to the variable of churches and bars, I have the association one. The more churches you have, the more bars you have. So I have that association. The second one, I have temporal sequence. It could be as one goes up, the other one goes up. So as bars go up, so do churches. So the sequence is probably in effect. But then I have to reject the alternative hypotheses as well, which would be that the higher your population is, the more you'll have of each. So I would have to control for my population to establish cause and effect. And controlling for population would erase that cause and effect. So there are often other viable explanations for a change in a variable other than the hypothesized change. These possibilities must be investigated and accounted for before causation can be established. So establishing causation you must have correlation, temporal sequence, and be able to reject confounding explanations. So it's a high standard to meet. The benefits to using theories in research, well, we have three here. First, theories provide the underlying logic of occurrence of natural and social phenomenon by explaining what are the key drivers and key outcomes of the target phenomenon and why. What underlying processes are responsible for driving that phenomenon? It gives you credibility to produce empirical evidence of a theory a lot more than you would have credibility if you didn't have theory behind it. If you have theory and then your data shows that the theory is correct, if that theory is solid, it's logical in nature, it makes sense, then your credibility on your research association will be much higher. Theories aid in sense making by helping us synthesize prior empirical findings. Sometimes there's a lot of empirical findings, and theory can bring those together. So within a theoretical framework, and reconcile contradictory findings by discovering contingent factors influencing relationship between two constructs in a different studies. So theories help us simplify things. Theories by definition are simple. So theories aid us in taking all this data that we have, possibly publications that are related to each other across the board, maybe hundreds of publications. Theory may be able to help us simplify that and get it down into a reasonable explanation for what's going on in the real world. 3, theories provide guidance for future research by helping identify constructs and relationships that are worthy of further research. Sometimes theories help us say, okay, we see this, empirical data will show that it's true. Theory can make us want to extend it further. In the maturing process of theories get adjusted. They are simple at first, but we can narrow those theories down into other simple micro theories that will present us with a research agenda going forward. So that is the benefit of theories in research. However, there are limitations. Theories are designed to be simple. Sometimes things aren't simple. Sometimes things are a lot more complex than theories allow us to see. So this is part of the limitation of theories, but theory can help us, initially by setting agendas, allow us to see something that's complex in a simple manner, somewhat exploratory in nature, like the exploratory research that we talked about in an earlier chapter. That exploratory research may tell us that we need to take our theory and move it into a more micro level and look at more simplified theories inside of theories themselves. Life sometimes isn't as simple as theory wants us to make it. If that's the case, we need to adjust. The other limitation is theories may impose blinders or limit researchers' range of vision, causing them to miss out on important concepts that are not defined by theory. Sometimes we let theory bound us. And when that happens, it's important to step back and possibly create more theories ourselves, see the world in another possibility. It doesn't mean that we have to believe that theory is right, but if it is possible, if there's a counter explanation for what's going on, we need to test it empirically. So those are the limitations of theory. Attributes of a good theory. How do you evaluate the goodness of a theory? Well, first, I think I mentioned this earlier on an earlier slide, but we really need to have logical, consistent building blocks in a theory. If there isn't consistency in those building blocks, those parts of the theory that are vital to it actually being true, if those building blocks aren't there, then the theory itself will not be good. People will not believe it. So it's important when you build your theory to build it on logical consistency or things that are logically consistent. Good theories are also, they have explanatory power. A good theory explains reality, not fiction. That's where conspiracy theories lose their credibility. A lot of times conspiracy theories don't have no backing at all. They sound good sometimes to the people who want them to be a reality, but they're not reality. There's something made up. So a fictional story is not a theory. Theory explains reality, and you need to have some evidence of reality for it to be a good theory. Good theories are also falsifiable. The presence of rival explanations have to be there. So if you have a theory that says, as the example here says, a day with high temperatures is a hot day. Well, we know that. It's, tautologically, it's not a sound theory because basically what you're saying is something equals itself. By definition, a day with high temperatures is a hot day. So that's not empirically testable. Of course, it's a perfect correlation. The higher your temperature, the hotter the day, because they're actually, one is a variable of the construct itself. The construct being a hot day, the temperature being the variable that measures it. So that's not a good theory. Good theories have rival explanations that need to be tested. If you don't have rival explanations, then the theory is just not a good theory. Lastly, parsimony is something that all theories have. All good theories have parsimony or simplicity. Theories that are super complex are not in the best interest of theories. If you have something that may be that complex, it's much better to build it up through a series of theories and let the theory mature into something that's complex. So those are the 4 good theory attributes. Now, we're going to talk about a couple of theories: principal agent theory general deterrence theory, just to get an idea of what theories are like. I like these two theories. They have decent examples in the book. And so I'm just going to talk about these two. I'm going to start with the principal agent theory or agency theory. The agency theory says there's two parts in this theory that are the principal and the agent. So this is about a principal and agent relationship. The principal employs the agent to perform certain tasks on its behalf. The agent represents the principal in the day-to-day transactions. So the agent is representing the principal. The principal has something for the agent to do. Second part, while the principal's goal is quick and effective completion of the while the principal's goal is quick and effective completion of the assigned task, the agent's goal may be working at its own pace, or avoiding risks, or seeking other self-interest things like more pay. And those interests are taking over at the expense of the principal's interests. So you have this principal agent theory going on. Principals have a self-interest. They hire an agent to express and complete their self-interest, but in the process, the agent has his own interests that start to take over and deplete the interests of the principal. So the goal of agency theory is to specify optimal contracts and the conditions under which those contracts may minimize the effect of goal differences or incongruence, or minimize the agent's desire to stay away from the principal's wishes and push their own self-interest. So that's what principal agency theory does. And they talk about the assumptions of agency theory. There's 4 of them. The core assumptions of this theory are that human beings are self-interested individuals. So if people have a self-interest, they do it. Now, this sometimes gets confusing because people say, well, there's lots of people who work hard for their bosses, and that wouldn't be in their self-interest. They could get away with not doing it. But I would argue otherwise. In most cases, working hard for your boss is in your self-interest. 1, you keep your job. 2, you gain a better reputation. If you're a young person early in your career, it's really, really important to develop a reputation of somebody who pushes aside their own self-interest for the self-interest of the organization or the principal. So when does that not occur? It doesn't occur when you have the ability, a lot of times you have the ability to not have to pay any price for expressing your own self-interest instead of the principal. So that's where you end up really seeing a lot of self-interested individuals. For instance, individuals who are not being checked whether they go to work or not. A lot of people will just go home. It doesn't matter if the boss isn't here. They're not going to catch me. I'm going to go home. It's very difficult to stay in work when everybody else goes home. And when it seems like the boss really doesn't care that much anyway, a lot of times you'll take your self-interest in that situation. So it's not as easy as it may sound to say, okay, self-interested individuals, all employees are going to be loafers on the job. That's not exactly true, but it can happen. Boundedly rational. People are boundedly rational. In other words, they do what makes sense. And so if it makes sense for you to go home, you don't have to worry about what the boss wants. You're still going to get paid. Boundedly rational people will probably do that. People are also risk averse. This is just a natural thing. People don't like to take risks. Jobs where you are, the first thing comes into your mind are jobs there where people are walking along roofs, dangerous jobs, firefighters, and so forth. If you're a risk-averse person, you can't do those jobs. In a lot of cases, the people who do those jobs, firefighters, police officers, any first responders, those are not people who are risk-averse can't really do those well. People who do those, there's special kind of rationality there. as far as I can see, where they don't let it get in the way, the risk get in the way of them doing their job, because at least part of it is being empathetic, concern for other people, the need to go ahead and take a risk because other people's lives are at risk. And the other part is, I think that there's something of a calling where people think this is what I have to do. But most people aren't like that. Most people are risk averse, where they don't want to do dangerous things. And that makes sense. That's entirely rational. So if your job calls for you to do risky things and you can get out of it, you usually will take that opportunity and get out of it. Also, the last assumption is the theory can be applied. This theory can be applied at the individual organizational level. Agency theory, most of the time we think about individuals, employees and their bosses, or managers and the contractors. This can be organizations. Organizations can have this same dynamic. And these organizations aren't bounded to business. These can be government. Matter of fact, a lot of times they are government. They can be, especially in the federalist system. Organizations can also be the units of analysis in agency theory. So another problem in agency theory is information asymmetry. It's an important unknown. It's important because unknown information in transactions makes it where people get cheated in their transactions. The market system, in most cases, assumes that information asymmetry doesn't happen. For instance, if you're selling your house and your house is flooded before, the value of your house is lower. But if you can hide the fact that it's flooded before, then you could probably get a lot more money for it. But the issue is that's information asymmetry. You should not have that information asymmetry. People buying a house should know if it's flooded before, so they can make a rational transaction with you. Information asymmetry is a problem in transactions. So if bosses don't know what their employees are doing, if they don't check on their employees, if they go all day without checking on them, they never see what they're doing. If they don't have that information, then in a lot of cases, they will lose out in the principal agent dynamic, because agents will do what's in their self-interest. So information asymmetry is important. Is important. A person who I have the example of the person selling his home for a higher price because it flooded. Information asymmetry problems by the principal's inability to adequately observe his agent's behavior or accurately evaluate the agent's set of skills. That's another one where people say, I'm qualified to do a job, but they're not. That happens a lot. And you hire somebody to do a job thinking it can be done, and the person can't actually do the job. You lose a lot of money on that. So that's an information asymmetry problem. When that occurs, the principal agent problem is exacerbated. So the principal agent theory offers solutions for this. The theory says you should assume that people will be in their self-interest and work in their self-interest. You should assume they'll be risk averse. You should assume that they'll work at their own pace if they want to. You should assume that they will hide information from you if it will get them something better. So there's certain things that you should do to make sure that it doesn't happen. First, use incentive-based contracts with payment for completion and time restrictions. So this is done in academics all the time, where professors put a time limit or a due date. And if you don't hit that due date, then you get penalized for not hitting that due date. This is basically a principal agent strategy, where the professor says, okay, I want this stuff in on time. If you don't get it in on time, the punishment will be there and you will lose points. So if you don't put that in there, chances are people will turn in things late if there's no penalty for turning in things late. Second, avoid hourly and monthly salaries. It's much better to have a completion contract. Now, the the people who have learned this the most are contractors of highways, people who build highways. If you're a government agency, used to in the contracts, they did not have time limits on when the highway had to be finished. Now, not getting a highway finished on time is incredibly expensive. Think about it. Think about how many cars go across a highway. Every car going across a highway has people in it, and those people's time is worth money. If, even people with low salaries make $15 or $20 an hour. It happens a lot. Some people make less. Most of those are younger people. But if you just consider the time amount that their time is worth $15 or $20 an hour, and then on the streets, they have to spend an extra 30 minutes every day in traffic because your highway isn't done, the cost goes into the millions very quickly. So it's important, if you need a highway, to get it done quickly. Put that in your contract. The highway systems around Houston have been incredible at making sure that these time incentive contracts are out for people who build highways. Highways are getting built so much faster than they used to be, because they've taken this principal agent solution and implemented it. Another thing is they said have employee stock options, where if employees buy stock in the company, then they have a rational self-interest in that company doing well, which means they have some self-interest in not going home and getting the work done, because they're going to get paid for getting that work done in stock options. And also they say, monitoring is important. In the day of technology that we have now, supervisors need cameras on their employees, cameras everywhere. You need to have some kind of monitoring to go on. This helps with the principal agent problem. So as long as this need for solutions is in your head when you are the principal, and you put yourself in the agent's shoes and see their self-interest, if you need for your self-interest to be satisfied, you need to make sure you have those incentives put in for the agent to make sure that the agent is on your side as much as you are. Second theory, general deterrence theory. This is a utilitarian theory. Utilitarianism is a philosophy of ethics. If you ever take an ethics course, utilitarianism will be in it. They have utilitarianism. The basic assumption is that people are hedonists, that people will do whatever they can to extend pleasure and do whatever they can to avoid pain. Now, pleasure and pain, we tend to think about that as, in your body, pleasure in your body and pain in your body. But pleasure and pain happens in punishments and rewards all over our system. Now, payment itself, money itself, is a pleasure. You're getting punished, getting put in jail is a pain. So those pleasures and pains are all over our system. So these utilitarian philosophers, Beccaria and Bentham is probably the father of utilitarianism. They built this theory of general deterrence theory, and it's basically a theory about crime and deviance. And the theory, they're utilitarian, and so they believe that people act in ways to extend their pleasure and in ways to avoid pain. So this theory assumes that people are fundamentally rational for both conforming and deviant behaviors. So people will have deviant behaviors if there is no pain involved and pleasure comes from deviant behavior. Bentham and Beccaria will tell you that people will do the deviant behavior to get pleasure. So the theory assumes that people are fundamentally rational for both conforming behaviors and deviant behaviors, and that they freely choose deviant behaviors based on rational cost-benefit calculation. This theory basically says everybody has a cost-benefit calculation. Should I do this? Well, if it's not going to bring you pleasure, you say no. But if if you need to avoid pain by doing it, then you make another calculation and you may do it. For instance, going to work every day. If you have a bad job, you don't want to go to work. But the pain of not having any money is a lot worse than the pain of going to work. So you make a rational hedonistic decision in the utilitarian model to go ahead and go to work and get your money and build your career. And the same goes for deviant behaviors. Are you going to steal that $100 bill? Well, it depends. Are you going to have any pain for stealing the $100 bill? Sometimes the pain is just in your head. Like you'll feel guilt. Maybe sometimes that guilt of stealing that $100 bill will eat at you so much that that pain will not be worth stealing it. I mean, this happens with people a lot when they do something, they do a criminal act and they feel guilty about it, or they cheat and they feel guilty about it, and then they just can't stand it anymore. They have to admit it in order to get the guilt out, get the pain out. So that's what this theory is based on. Because people naturally choose utility maximizing behaviors, deviant choices that engender personal gain or pleasure can be controlled by increasing the costs of such behaviors in the form of punishments or countermeasures, as well as increasing the probability of apprehension. And this comes in with crime. If you are presented with the opportunity to commit a crime, the utilitarian philosophy will say, okay, you're going to make a calculation. One, how much benefit will this crime give me? What are my chances of getting caught? If I do get caught, how long will I have? What kind of a punishment will I get? If it turns out that the chances of getting caught are very high and the punishment is very severe, people will think twice about committing the criminal act. But if they know the police aren't going to pick them up, if they know after a while, I mean, you see this in neighborhoods all the time. Give me a sign that nobody cares, and I'll do it. All right. The classic example is the broken windows theory by Wilson and Kelling. They published an article in 1982 on the broken windows theory, and what they did was they went around Harlem. They went to Harlem, and they looked and they took notes. They saw graffiti all over the wall. They saw broken windows all over the place. They saw a wreck. And when they see that wreck, people see that wreck, they think it's okay. So they wreck things further. So their theory is the broken windows theory. So what they did was they went to Palo Alto, California. Palo Alto is where Stanford is. Beautiful place. And they just parked the car alongside the street. And they watched it to see if it would get vandalized. Never got vandalized. Days and days, nobody would touch it. Nothing would happen to it. They parked one in Harlem at the same time. The one they parked in Harlem just got stripped. And so, I mean, basically they jacked it up, took the wheels off, took everything off of it, and it was left on the pavement. In Palo Alto, the car just sit there, which is fine. So Wilson and Kelly decided, well, let's try this. They went up and they broke the window of the car in Palo Alto. Just broke one window in the car and turned around, walked off to see what happened. In very short order, the entire car was stripped and vandalized, and it looked just like the car in Harlem because the message was sent that it was okay to break a window. And so when you see something like that and the message is sent, it's okay to vandalize. It's okay to be deviant. People take it as an opportunity to do so. I've seen it in neighborhoods. You break one window in a house and all of a sudden everybody thinks it's okay to pick up a rock and break windows out of the house. It happens all the time. Graffiti. You paint one little piece of graffiti anywhere, on a wall, anywhere. It doesn't take long. The whole wall is filled up because people respond by saying, okay, it's deviant behavior is okay here. I've been sent the message. This was part of my theory on schools when I developed that article on schools and what happens to student attendance. Schools that are dilapidated, people just stop performing. They don't think it's important anymore. Students get the message quicker than anybody. They walk into school and they see, a torn down school, a tore up school, things aren't going well. They don't have the message, this is a place for learning. They have a message that this is a place for deviance. So it's really important. If you see, these days, if you see somebody paint anything on a school, any graffiti, the very first thing you got to do is that day, you got to cover it up. You got to go clean it up that day. You can't let it go a week, because if you let it go a week, things will go crazy. So you got to react. So this utilitarian theory is talking about how when people get the message that it's okay, they're happy to do their deviance. But if they get the message that they will be punished, that bad things will happen, they will not be accepted. If they commit this behavior, then their behavior changes. So swift, severe, certain punishments are the key constructs of this GDT theory. And therefore, it is both an explanation of crime and a method for reducing it. If you want to reduce crime, you punish people for doing it, you make it hard to do, you put locks on your doors, you put police everywhere, you put people in jail, you have harsher punishments, and so forth. Now, a lot of people, when Wilson and Kelly come out with their article, this was a lot of people say, well, this is a license for mischief by the police, and it's probably true. If you go for a maximum enforcement, we've seen that too, in situations like in Memphis, where they had this group of police who were really going overboard and ended up costing a person his life. This could have that negative effect. That negative effect is a possibility, but the assumptions are look to be true in most cases. That utilitarian theory works. If you punish people strongly for things, you have a death penalty. People will react to it and say, no, I'm not going to do that because they're going to kill me. So that's what the basis of this GDT theory is. If you look at other theories, remember we talked about theories having alternative explanations. This positive research in criminology says that crime is caused by poverty, crime is caused by a lack of education, psychological conditions cause crime. This is the typical social science approach to reducing crime: reduce poverty, give education, and so forth. The GDT theory would say, what causes crime? A personal situation, a situation of desperation, which does relate to poverty and so forth. But if you're in a situation where committing the crime doesn't matter that much, then you're much more likely to do that. I remember I was walking down the street one day, and a guy a homeless guy come up and asked me for money, and he was physically threatening me. And he said, I don't care. You want to call the cops, put me in jail, it's okay. Jail's a better life for me than what I have out here. And it's truth. I remember Representative Kevin Bailey said he had a person walk up to him and said, it's getting close to wintertime and I need some dental work done. It's time for me to commit a crime and get into jail where I can get some dental work done and live in the penitentiary. It's better than what I have right now. So the personal situation is highly correlated with poverty. That personal situation creates no deterrence for crime whatsoever. Personal values as well. If you have a lot of empathy, where you feel guilty about doing things that hurt people, you're less likely to commit crimes, because that empathy, that guilt is punishment, it's pain, and it's hard for you to deal with. So when you have that, then you're less likely to do that. If you're narcissistic, you don't have a lot of love for you, or at least you don't love people any more than you love yourself, then that's less likely to be the case. And then if you're a full-fledged sociopath or psychopath, it's not the case at all. You could care less about anybody else. So the only thing that really matters is you. Now, there's a lot of psychopaths who never go to jail, who do just fine in society, but because they're rational people who understand that if they commit crimes, they're going to pay a price. That if they treat somebody badly, that treatment will be known and they'll have to pay a price. Those psychopaths are very, very smart and very intelligent. They understand that life is a calculation, a utilitarian calculation. So sometimes they are able to survive with this utilitarian calculation and not commit crimes and not go to jail. Sociopaths, not so much. Most of the time they don't really care. They just kind of go all. And that's And that means that they end up in jail a lot more often. But if you need money, I mean, if you need money, you're in a desperate situation. So you're willing to take that chance. If you're rich, you're not going to go rob a bank if you're rich, unless there's some psychological issue. Winona Ryder went on a shoplifting spree. She went on a shoplifting spree, even though she has millions and millions of dollars. It was a psychological issue with her, where she needed to deal with that. But that's unusual. Most of the time, when people steal, it's because they need money, or just an environment of a lack environment that we've talked about before. Easy, if there's easy access to crime, there's not much police around. The signs are always right in front of you. You see these signs where it's okay, you can get away with anything you want. Deviant behavior happens a lot more often in those situations. So, reform crime by theory. The positive research in criminology would say, let's do job training, let's get medical treatment, let's give people a chance to, education. Let's give people a chance, and they won't commit crime if they have these skills. The GDT theory, general deterrence theory, says, let's make criminal activity a lot less attractive. Let's have more police, harsher sentences, the death penalty, efficient police who are able to arrest, they have skills, able to track down criminals, and more security. Let's have locks and surveillance. Let's make it really hard to commit crimes. That's the differences in those two theories. Now, you can test these theories empirically. You can gather data and test those theories. And so that would be the next step in research. But the first step of theory is right there with these two theories. I want to thank you. I think chapter 3 is good chapter for us in initiating the research experience. If you have any questions, let me know. I am happy to answer your questions. Let me see if I can get into a little bigger screen here. And it's not letting me do it. Anyway, well, I appreciate everything. If you have any questions, give me an email, and I will see you. There's the stop share. I will see you later in the semester. I am hoping that if you have any questions, that you don't hesitate. Please email me. I'm happy to do a Zoom meeting, happy to talk to you, or just meet with you face to face. Thank you very much. Have a good day.